Hey, shout out, folks. It's Bob the Old Rucker, and welcome to Shout Out from the Pit. Yeah, the host sucks, but the guests are awesome. I'm your host, and Redbeard is your nerd in the basement, as he says. So before I launch into our tribute, I got to tell you, the last couple of weeks have been a blur. I got home as the fireworks were in full splendor on July 4th. Now, you've heard me talk about my trusty sidekick, Danny. Danny's never met a stranger and literally greets every visitor that comes to the house. What I haven't mentioned is that for over the last decade, he's one of those pups that loses his mind during fireworks and storms. Now, I've thought about giving him doggy drugs, but at this point in his old life, we just hug and love on him. So anyway, I pull into the driveway and Danny runs out of the house. He beelines to me while leaving a pea line, nudges my legs, and races back into the house. I got the message. He loves me, but man, these storms are out of control. So follow me. We'll go in the house and hang out on the carpet. So my yard looked like a jungle and the mail was stacked. But there's no place like home, where the bride and pups always greet me with love. Regarding our pups, besides Danny the big Pyrenees retriever, we also have Kita, a 4-pound Applehead Chihuahua. Yeah, I don't mention her a lot because you kind of forget she's around. But there's no place like home. So on this last unscheduled trip, my first stop was Emporia, Kansas, to visit family I haven't seen in a few years. And a huge shout out to Emporia, Alcoholics Anonymous. Y'all are awesome and gracious, and thanks for treating me like one of your own. And ginormous shout out to my brother Les for the 18 months of continuous sobriety. Brother, you're doing the deal, and I hope to hear from you all, so please keep in touch. Now on to my next stop, my actual intended stop, Pine Top, Arizona. This stop was bittersweet. My dear cousin, Bobby, her husband, Paul, went to be with the Lord in late June. The funeral service was July 3rd. Bobby blessed me with being part of an awesome tribute to a brother in sobriety. This show is dedicated entirely to Paul Aries, husband, father, brother, veteran, and all-around outstanding American. It did get me thinking about my own inevitable death. What do you imagine when you think of your death? I mean, come on, everybody thinks of it, unless you're a dog like Danny and little Cheetah. You know, they only think of food, sleep, and who they can lick next. But people, we wonder how we'll go, and for some of us, where we'll go. I guess that's a podcast waiting to happen. I've actually never really thought of who will come to my funeral, what impact I may have had on folks. But hey, Paul's funeral, it was amazing. It was an amazing gathering. It was an amazing event. The place where the service was held was literally packed. I don't even know if I know as many people as the number of people that came to honor Paul's life. Seriously, it was just amazing. I heard a lot of cool things about Paul, and even, some of the last things he said, one in particular to a brother before he passed. You need to be thinking about living sober, not dying drunk. I heard many years ago, those of us guys that got into recovery, we're one of two types, and excuse me for saying this, but we're one of two types of bastards. I can't speak for the ladies, but those of us with a history of wreckage have invariably been called a bastard. And I heard it goes something like this. Imagine a funeral and one guy asks another, "Was Bob drinking when he died?" "Yeah," says the other guy. "Poor bastard," concludes the first. Or, same question, "Was Bob sober when he died?" "Yeah, sure was," says the other guy. "That lucky bastard," concludes the first. Well, Paul was more than lucky. He was blessed. Blessed because, as I witnessed firsthand, he blessed a whole lot of people. Now, Paul would differ with me and anyone who says he died a hero, but I would differ with him. You see, there's men and women who have received the Medal of Honor, the highest recognition for military service. And there are men and women who receive the Medal of Valor, the highest award given by the Secretary of Defense. What these awards have in common is that recipients don't win them. You can't compete for them. You get them for doing extraordinary things for fellow Americans. But in Paul's case, there won't be a medal. Because in Paul's case, and many men and women like him, service work is done anonymously. Consider Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Paul was not one to brag or look for a pat on the back for helping others, whether people in recovery or people just in need. Or how about John chapter 15, verse 13? Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. This is the Paul his family and friends knew and loved. Bobby shared with me that Paul favored his biblical namesake, Paul. I thought that was interesting, knowing the biblical Paul's then, when he was on the self-righteous path, and the now, when he did for people what he did for people when he got onto the righteous path. The biblical Paul, though previously called Saul, had good intentions, but his methods of being a godly man were really harsh. He literally held the cloaks of the men who stoned Stephen to death, the first documented Christian martyr. On his journey to the city of Damascus, he had his spiritual awakening, as we say in recovery. Saul, at that point, became Paul and spent the rest of his life, like our Paul, serving people right up until the Lord brought him home. Biblical Paul was beheaded for his belief. All he had to do was stop spreading the good news. Our Paul, had he been given the same choice, I imagine would have chosen the same fate. Paul stood for his beliefs, and no man was going to knock him off that rock. We stand for something, or we fall for anything. We encourage you to take a stand for righteousness, for doing the right thing for people. Bobby allowed me to peruse Paul's big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Paul just reached his 35th sober anniversary, May 19th. His book was more than a paperweight or shelf decoration. It's loaded with notes, scribbles, bookmarks, and highlights. Now, the big book has been called many things, most notably a guide for living sober, finding and then giving hope to others that aren't just struggling with the alcohol addiction, but learning to live life on life's terms. Ultimately, the big book teaches us to establish a higher power of our understanding and then pay it forward, giving hope to the hurting as hope was so freely given to us. Paul was a living example of paying it forward. Now, Bobby also allowed me to peruse Paul's Bible. Allow me to inject that Paul was also a Harley man. Those of us that have Harleys know it's personal to us, and no one sits on our bikes. Consequences are dire. Paul's big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and his Bible are also very personal. I felt like I was trespassing, and though I know Paul wouldn't mind, I still feel apologies are in order. Anyway, like his big book, his Bible is full of highlights. A few got my attention. As I read them to you, see if you see the same pattern I discovered. Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. For where 2 or 3 gather together in my name, I am there among them. John chapter 13, verses 14 and 15. And since I, the Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. John chapter 13, verse 34. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love one another. And John chapter 14, verse 12. The truth is, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done, and even greater works. Do you see the pattern? Our Paul is drawn to scriptures that describe service work. There's no doubt in my military mind, Paul heard the words from Matthew chapter 25, verse 21, when he met the God of his understanding. Well done, good and faithful servant. I began this tribute by mentioning Paul's legacy, the impact he left. Let it be known that we'll either leave our legacy on a tombstone or on hearts. Paul most definitely chose to leave it on hearts, our hearts. And I'm sure he'd encourage you to do the same. And he'd lead by example. Like St. Francis of Assisi said, preach the word wherever you go, and when necessary, use words. In closing, I invite you to hear some of the thoughts people shared that will keep Paul's legacy alive. And before we cut to those sound bites, I remind you that if no one's told you you're loved today, remember Redbeard and I love you. God bless you, and have an outstanding American Day. All right, folks, take a listen.
Hi, my name's Mark. I'm an alcoholic. How's it going, everybody? I met Paul. It's been 16 years now. We worked together at a place called OAS. I was new to the mountain. My sobriety was relatively new as well. And in terms of, I went through a hardship. The first time I met Paul, he came off as a roughneck. He's dead to a lot of people. Crap about his long hair he wore. Just told him that the white Jamaican. and for some reason, he thought that was really hilarious. Excuse me. I didn't have a sponsor at the time. And he saw the hardship in my face. Because Paul had a heart that was open to everybody, as we all know. And it was getting towards our lunchtime, and he took me outside. And we didn't have a whole lot of camaraderie at work. I mean, we'd pass by and talk to each other and goof, but he pulled me outside and he looked at me. If you ever need me, I'm here. That's where it all began. He opened his heart. He opened his mind to me. Didn't even know me. I was a complete nobody. Something that I learned with his wisdom is that AA related, you are to strip yourself to become free to your higher power. Because your self-worth is always inside. It's not what the appearance is. And that's always stuck with. He was a mentor. He was a friend. He was a true gentleman, and he really was. Even though, like we all said, he came off as wrecked up sometimes. I mean, you could catch him on his bad days, and he would call you out on your bullshit. You would try and evade certain things and reel you back in. And he was really good at that. But the one thing that he did is that he was constantly, like you said, always working. Years later, I ended up moving off the mountain, and I had something really tragic happen in my life. First thing that I lost my brother. And it kept in my mind that he always had this saying, it always takes two people to have a meeting. I had a very, 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 very black, dark spot when my brother passed away. So I called my mentor. We had that two-person meeting that day. With his wisdom and his words, he taught me something that no man could ever think of. Because us as alcoholics, we always want to be right. We always want to prove something different, right? And I was so angry at the time. And he asked me, why are you so angry? You didn't do this. Quit blaming yourself. You have to see past that. I was 200 miles away. And he called me the next damn day going, hey, you good? And I always know what that meant. And as soon as I said, yeah, he goes, bullshit. And here we went again. But he did it out of responsibility, care, and love. Like I said, he just wasn't a mentor. He was actually one of my dearest friends. Moving forward, me and my wife had another tragic event happen. My daughter was also an addict, an alcoholic. She passed 2 years ago at 21. Now, I'm not here to tell you my story and create sorrows, because that's not what we're here for. But he helped me get through that time again. Because as we are alcoholics, we want to fix everything, right? We forget who we are. We want to take care of everybody else instead of staying with the bare roots that we need to stay in recovery. My daughter used to ask me all the time if I could be her sponsor, and I told her I can't. It was hard for her to comprehend that. And the things that I learned from Paul still today and always will help me get through these hard times. So I never see that dark alley, And my belief, and I grew up always believing this until I realized that when my grandfather passed away before he did on his deathbed, and this is a true story. I was getting ready to leave the house, He was under severe medication. Hospice was there. I gave him a kiss on the forehead, and I said, I'm going to go, Pop. I'm going to say goodbye. He grabbed my hand, which scared the living shit out of me because I mean, he was completely out. And he looked at me and he goes, remember, never say goodbye. Always say see you later. So today, as us as a group, I say to you, Paul, we may not see you, but you will always be present. Everywhere we look, every meeting that we go to, you will always be there. You'll always be there to call us out on all of our bullshit, and you'll always be pushing us forward. You've been a great friend, and you always will be, to all of us. God bless every single one of you, my brothers and sisters.
Hello, everyone. My name is Meredith, and I'm Paul's sister from Miami, Florida. It means so much to me to see you all here to honor Paul and show your support for the family. He would have been really very, very touched to know that you were here. When I think about growing up with Paul, the word that comes to mind is closeness. He was a jokester. He had a wonderful sense of humor, very dry, but he could make me laugh in a second. All it took was one glance, one look, and I was just on the floor. Some of you may know that this past November, we were truly blessed. Paul surprised us by riding his motorcycle alone all the way down to Homestead. He spent Thanksgiving with us for the first time in years with his brothers and sisters and everyone in Miami that loved him. That time together meant the world to us, and I'm so grateful for that, especially now. As everyone knows, Paul was a good man, a loving soul. He was the kind of guy who, as most of you know, would help anyone. He was always honest. He was always giving his best, 100%. He was tenacious, a take charge, do it all kind of guy. He was intense and he was passionate. And he poured himself into everything that he did, whether it was chopping wood, building something with his, working on his motorcycle, supporting others through his work with AA. He worked hard to make amends with those he had hurt and to himself. I hope all of us will carry his love with us as a lasting memory, one that brings us hope, strength, and the courage to keep going, even when life gets hard. As Paul is reminding us now, life is short. I believe he's at peace now. He's beyond those gates. He's in the presence of God's radiant light and everlasting love. I will always remember Paul's beautiful smile, his humor, his passion for life, his love for his wife, his sons, daughter, and how proud he was of his grandchildren. Thank you, Paul, for being you. You were hell on wheels. I will love and miss you always, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you all for being here today to honor Paul, to show your love, and to say so long. God bless you all. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm an alcoholic named Richard. I'm Paul's brother, and he was my AA twin. I couldn't have said it better. Hell on wheels. You know, I'll never forget the kind of man he was. I had some issues with cancer, and I was always invited to Paul and Bobby's house every summer. Come, and I was in Springerville, and I saw a really cool cane, and I told them about it, and I said, yeah, but I couldn't afford it. And the next day they said, well, we got to go for a ride. And Bobby and Paul jumped on the motorcycle. We're going to see my mom and dad out of Joe, wherever the hell it was. A little while later, they come back a few hours later, and they got the damn cane. Here you go, brother. You know, that's the kind of people they are. They always put others, you know. Let me tell you about growing up with Paul a little bit. You know, we come from 4 boys and 2 girls. I had an older brother that in Miami, we have what's called Bermuda grass. And my older brother used to tackle me and pin me down and tickle my nose with grass. And then I would tackle Paul and tickle his nose with grass. And Paul would tickle Doug's nose with grass. And poor Doug, he didn't have anybody to tickle his. So, you know, it was just always Paul. He he went off to the military, and he traveled to Germany, went over to Japan and Korea, and I didn't get to know Paul for a lot of years. But one night we sat in front of his now ex-wife's house, and I was in AA, and I told Paul knew he had a drinking problem, and we were talking. He said, "Do you think this stuff works?" I said, "Well, I think so." It took Paul a couple of years to think about it, and, I went on my way, and he decided to get sober. He did. And the guy that introduced him to it ended up relapsing more times than he can count. But he stayed sober because he believed. And that was what he was looking for. And, when we would come up here, Paul was always, "You want to go to a meeting? Get in the truck. Let's go to a meeting." Get in the truck. And Bobby and I and everybody would pile in, no telling, the meeting at the vet center. That was some of the here on the mountain. And Paul would take me out in the woods, and I'm from Miami, Florida. What the hell do I know about a chainsaw? And he'd take me out in the middle of somewhere, and he'd take me in that white truck, and we'd start going up this mountain, and it's like this way. I'm like, ah! He said, "Don't worry, we got that." As we're sliding backwards, we got this. Paul and I, it's back when I could walk, and talk, "Paul, this and this and this about a business. Where'd you find that?" "Paul, you got to open the pages." "Yeah, you're right." And he did that. And Bobby did it. They knew that damn book forward and backwards. And I'd hate it when they'd correct me and say, that ain't the way it was. And, and we would go to these meetings and just enjoy AA. And Paul and I go to the lunch and go to the men's meeting, go to the noon meeting, and every year I had some medical problem. I have some medical problems that I had to have taken care of. And he said, "Rick, are you coming out?" I said, "No, Paul." On that Thursday before Paul passed, I said, "I have to do these medical things." He said, "All right." I said, "I'll probably come out in the fall." "All right." And know that when we saw him for Thanksgiving, it was just such a blast to have him. And I said, "You going home?" He says, "Hell no, I'm going to Vicky's house." Oh, jeez. and the snow and the rain and the mud and the blood and the beer. Oh, my God. That man, he's nuts. But, outside, went to a Native Americans in sobriety, and there was a medicine man named Johnny, and told him I wanted a ring to make me a ring, and because it's good in crafting. And one time he went out there, Paul and I, and he said, "Come back here, I want to show you something." And he took me and he showed me a ring. And he says, "Which one do you want?" I said, "I want this one." And he says, "Go get your brother, because I got one for him too." And we both have it. And we were that way. He was a good man. He was a solid man. And he believed in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll share with you something that we're all pretty familiar with. And it says, "The great fact for us is just like this and nothing less. We had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have," I can't even read it, "have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life." This light work? I hope. Yeah. Good. Now we can see old eyes. It says, "Toward our fellows and towards God's universe. The central factor of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in ways which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves." And Paul and I, we read together and said, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, and where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. And where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to understand, be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life." And the last share, because AA was Paul, and you all know him as that. And Bobby, just amazing. And it says, if I can get it pulled back up here, A complete change has taken place in our approach to life. Where we used to run from responsibility, we find ourselves accepting it with gratitude that we can successfully shoulder it. And instead of wanting to escape from some perplexing problem, we experience a thrill in the challenge, in the opportunity it affords for another application of AA techniques, and we find ourselves tackling surprising vigor. The last 15 years of my life has been rich and meaningful. I've had my share of problems, heartaches, and disappointments, because that is life. But I've also known a great deal of joy and peace, and that is the handmaiden of inner freedom. I have a wealth of friends, and with my AA friends, an unusual quality of fellowship for these people, and are truly related, first through mutual pain and despair, and later through mutual objectives and newfound faith and hope. And as the years go by, working together, sharing our experiences with one another, and also sharing a mutual trust and understanding, love without strings, without obligation, we acquire relationships that are unique and priceless. There is no more aloneness with that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. The ache is gone and never need return again. Now there is a sense of belonging, of being wanted, needed, and loved. And in return for a bottle, we have been given the key to the kingdom. Thank you, Bobby, for letting me share that. I love you. Thank you, everybody, for letting me talk out loud to myself. My condolences, Christian Sean. Tell me no racing. Because I can get down there, but I can't get back up.
My name's Robert. So, I met Paul and Bobby April of 2018. I just got out of prison. And, I did 10 years, and I thought that I got clean, and I decided to turn the 10-year prison term into Bible college. I had a thought one day, what would my life look like if I spent the whole time studying the Bible? And I literally did that for 10 years. I earned a bachelor's degree. Thought I was going to get out of prison and be a Pentecostal preacher in one of these big denominational churches. I met Paul and Bobby at AA and started telling them about the Jesus that I met when I was in prison. So, I had a hard time with organized religion. I had a hard time with all of that stuff. And Jesus I met in prison that picked 12 followers. And he picked those guys and took them everywhere with him. And he loved those guys. And he ministered to them and taught them how to be real men. One of those guys is named Judas. He knew that guy was going to rat him out and stab him in the back. And he loved him and washed his feet all the way to the end. That's the Jesus I know. Most incredible man that's ever lived. I don't know anybody on this earth that could do what he did. And when I started telling Paul about Jesus, he had me over to their house to have a Bible study. Then I moved to California and met my wife. And we were going to get married, and Paul was my best man. He came down to that church down there where we got married, and he got baptized in Jesus' name according to the scripture, his wife. And about 2 years into the deal, I realized I'm not ever, and it's interesting because we started going back to 12-step recovery, my wife and I, and we started doing the same thing down there in Mesa. We have a Bible study and we go to Narcotics Anonymous. See, the Jesus I know, and the Jesus that Paul knows, is the Jesus that would go to the place where people are hurting, where people are lost, and where people are seeking for something different. And he would reveal himself to. And so that's the thing I know. The last time I had a conversation with Paul, it was so good to hear him and how far he had come with his relationship with Jesus Christ. It just blessed me. I could tell he had a hold of him. And he had a hold of the real Jesus, not Not all this other stuff that you see going on in the world today, man. There's some weird stuff going on. And I'm telling you, man, there's some weird stuff. My God, I can't even believe it. And, it's just so interesting that God knew what he wanted to do with me. So when I met Paul and Bobby, and we used to have our little Bible studies, and the lights came on and they understood, that's what God wanted me to do. He didn't want me to think that I thought. And I'll just love you guys so much. I'm so grateful for them. The last thing I want to say, when I got out of prison, I didn't have, my first 5 years in prison, I burned my life to the ground so bad. If I would have died, they would have had to bury me in Booty. Nobody would have came and claimed my carcass. And when I got out of prison, Paul was such a, we were such friends. And I could just tell he just loved me. And we had such a, and so this is the hardest thing for me, because this is the first time I've ever lost somebody that I really, and that we've only known each other for a short time. But I'm always good for everything you guys have done. It's been in my heart.
Well, if real men don't cry, who do I give my man card to? Hey, Ralph, Gary, I know you guys show a lot of grace to alcoholics. I forgot to push record when we were up here. I told you, the host sucks. So at the community center, make sure that we get together and capture your thoughts, all right?
All right.
Hey, I'm supposed to remind you we're going to Lakeside Cemetery from there too. Okay. All right, so as far as prayers go, I can lead from the heart, but, knowing what I know about Paul, he's cool with that. But I think, Ralph, God has started off with serenity prayer. And so before we go there, most of us know the serenity prayer, and then maybe there's a few of us that know the rest of it, okay? So, Reinhard Niebuhr, this German philosopher, wrote that thing out, and man, that guy was touched to give us that prayer, which is an awesome blessing. So I'd like to follow suit with you, Ralph, and start us off with the serenity prayer. And those of you that want to join along with the rest, fine. If you don't know it, just soak in the words, all right? Are we cool with that? Right on. Okay. Ralph, you want to kick us off with the first part of that?
Thank you. Again, I will always be an alcoholic, and my name is Ralph.
Ralph!
Okay, the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Take it as the sinful world as it is, not as I would. Trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender, so I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Boom. This is Gary, and I gave Paul's eulogy today, but apparently the guy that runs this thing doesn't know how to push it, so we're doing something different. But I do want to say that today I'm putting all my grieving aside for one day and just think about the good things that I got from Paul, about the love that he shared, about all the love that's right now that comes with what he did. I don't believe there's another man that I know that gives as much as Paul has given, and I'm happy to know him for the time that I've known, and I'm happy that he was always straight with me. He loved to use the word bullshit, and he used it a lot when he was talking to me. Thank you.
This is Coach Krim. I just want to let everybody know the first time that Paul and I went out for breakfast, we went to pay our bill, and somebody said, "Oh, that's okay. You two guys served our country, so guess what? Breakfast is on us." So this happens to be Independence Weekend, so let freedom ring. Love you, Paul. I'll miss you.
Paul, fellow alcoholic Mike Lucas. About 3 weeks before this occurrence, I was in a very dark place, and I think you knew it, and you came by the house out of the blue, along with Steve Ale, and we sat out underneath my umbrella, and you lifted me out of that darkness. And I'm forever going to be grateful for that. You're my friend. I will miss you forever. You have an imprint in my heart that will never go away. And thank you for being my friend.
Okay, hey, this is Steve. Steve Leitz from Scottsdale. Paul would like to hear that. Bobby, my heart goes out to you. This was a terrible, we were supposed to get together before you guys left on that camp out, and then you were gone. And then the next I hear was this shock. I love you, Bobby. I got to tell the story. This is for the podcast or for whatever form this is going on. When we did that charity event in Scottsdale, Paul says, I don't know if I'm up for a big charity event in Scottsdale, and you paid for it, and you said we're going. He showed up in his cowboy boots, and he had his hair slicked back. I told him he looked like Brad Pitt. We rolled up in the Porsche. We got the valet parking. We got the lights. We had all the pictures in the entrance, and that was such a fun night. So I know that most of the guys talked about what a badass and sort of a shit kicker Paul was. I just want everyone to know he fit in with the Lamborghinis and the private jets, too. Love you. Love you. Bye.
I'm Candy.
This is Larry. And Paul, we're always going to remember all the camping trips we did together. Greens Peak, Lower Log, and all the fun we had with camping with you guys. We love you.
And we miss you already.
Hey, Dad. Always love you. I'm going to miss you. Look forward to seeing you again.